What is up, everyone? Welcome back around the bonfire. My name is Matt. Yes, Matt, not John. John is away on a bachelor party, having a good time, probably partying right now. Back to talk some footy. We got an all-star cast joining me today, including, of course, Mr. Tim. Tim, how are you?
Good. Man, what a collection of white guy names you're about to say.
The best collection of white guy names you can think of, I think. Alongside Tim, of course, we have Mr. DJ. DJ, what do you have to share with us today?
I mean, yeah, my name is like the whitest name I think out of all of us.
It could possibly true. And of course, rounding out the crew, we have the pole of the goal, the man with a saxophone, not a trumpet, like I normally say, Mr. Allen. Allen, how are you?
I am sunburnt on my forehead as well as my arms. But overall, I had probably the best birthday yet so far.
That is correct. Happy belated birthday to Alan. Got the 3 points in your honor specifically for nobody else. And likewise, I know you guys can't see this on camera, but I am unbelievably burnt. Turns out the UV was really high at Soldier Field on Saturday, but Tim and DJ
or we're all just
not
that white. Yeah.
Or we're all
which is entirely possible.
Yeah. You know, the irony of the one Floridian not actually being the sunburnt one now.
Because you know to stay inside. We just need a Steve. I think that's the white guy name that we're really lacking. So, Steve, if you're listening to this and you'd like to be on the podcast, send us a DM.
Until then, Tim, I dub thee Steve.
That's longer. Go the other way. You've got to go shorter.
Tim,
please intro yourself as Steve on the next podcast. That is now your name for one podcast. But before we get into what we're actually here to talk about, a great day at Soldier Field, just wanted to acknowledge and apologize for the lack of a preview against Atlanta last week. Turns out with the combination of a U.S. Open Cup game and a game the week prior, scheduling was difficult and we were unable to get that out for you. And we send our sincerest apologies and we'll never do it again because we love all of you and are so grateful to everyone who listens to this show.
That being said, drunk after Detroit that we just did not do it.
Yeah, totally. No, it was just late and we couldn't do it. But we are very sorry. But we're here now to talk about what happened on Saturday. But before that, just some quick news that you might have seen on the website, on the X, wherever you get your news from. Brian Dowd, Notre Dame super draft pick from a couple years ago, last year, fully recalled from the loan on Tulsa to act as third goalkeeper in Christopher Brady's absence. We don't know much besides that. Maybe we'll know more whether or not this is a permanent thing or if he's going to be around for the rest of the season or if he's going to go out on loan. But this is through a hardship call-up due to Chris Brady's red card. So they won't get burned for having an extra guy on the roster, which is nice. Back to full strength on the goalkeeper front, but obviously we have yet to see his MLS debut at all. Now, over to the good stuff. Chicago Fire versus Atlanta United, Soldier Field. A beautiful day, and finally, the boys get their victory at home. A 2-1 win, highlighted, of course, by another Hugo Kuipers, Golden Boot leader Hugo Kuipers to you. And, of course, a Romaninge Kwame goal sandwiched in between a Sam Rogers own goal. Before we get into the nitty gritty, I just want to share the boys finally get the win on the road. What does that mean at this point in the season?
Home.
On the home. The other definitely not on the road. That's for sure. That's literally the whole point.
They're going to be on the road now, but
yeah, you're not going to be wrong if you keep on saying that for the next month. So
yeah, it's true. But no, they got that one on the home. Finally, 3 points. Something that feels very, very late into the season they could have accomplished. How does that make? What does that mean going into a long stretch that they finally broke that curse that had been haunting them for so long? And Tim, we'll start with you.
Oh, I asked Greg about it a couple of times, and he just said, "Look, the team just wants to win. We want to win at home. We want to win away." So, he denied that there was pressure on the team to get that win, but they said that they just, for the home fans, they were more concerned about playing good-looking soccer. And to be honest, they'd been doing that. But that's just one of those answers that you say, and it became a storyline, and storylines like that can become distractions. So it's good that it finally happened. And as usual, it was a little more dramatic than maybe a lot of people would have liked, but that's the way this team has been doing things. So.
Yeah, Alan, how does that go for the team. Moving on, long away stretch right now, but they got that barrier broken. What does that mean for the team and for you personally? I guess.
Well, for me personally, and I'm pretty sure for the fans, we can at least be happy that that stretch of winless games, either defeats or draws, is coming to an end, and that maybe we can see the beginning of the season form when they were on the road as well for a while, bring back that form as well and get more points on the road as well. So, but in general, it the combination of it being an afternoon game, the sun was out, little breeze, so it wasn't too hot, combined with 3 points. This, of course, has to be the best atmosphere we've had at home this season. And I can't wait for like the June, July games when it's really warm and when the team is really in form.
Yeah, that was unfortunately my last game in person for 3 months. So I'm actually really glad I got sunburned because I wanted a little taste of that summer. And DJ, I know it was raining in Florida, and obviously you weren't at the match, but 3 points at home. Could you feel the energy and the change in pace after the Fire broke that 6-game winless run?
Oh yeah, that was one of the things that even watching the game, you could tell right off the bat, like the fans were involved. Everything was just louder. Um, Adding on to it was very nice to see there be a mistake and the Fire not give up, which has happened in previous years, and also the fact that they had a home game where there were mistakes at home and it didn't cost them a victory, because
Yeah,
that's what's
and
happened the last 3 times with Cincinnati and that ref, and DC and the one wonder kick goal that man's ever going to have.
and it's not just that they didn't give up, right? Like it's the opposite. They conceded and then they turned it up, and I think
Yep.
we'll be talking about that in a second.
Yes, we will.
Austin,
Yeah,
am
it
I
was.
allowed to curse?
No.
Austin, am I allowed to curse? Because there's one very big word that can be used to describe the Fire's motto after they conceded that own goal.
Yeah, TJ, we're going to hold off on that one for now. This is a family friendly, but like Tim alluded to, they bounced back, and it felt like the team in general, all the way from Greg Berhalter to all the starters, and of course the subs who came on and made an instant impact, were on the same page, and ultimately that showed that the Fire were indeed the better team on the day. I know they only came out with a 2-1 win, but it felt like it could have been a lot more. I would argue that it should have been a lot more, and a lot of that is due to some great heroics from Brad Guzan, who I'm not sure how he's still in the league, but ultimately he's still churning out results. Brad Guzan making multiple good saves. I'd say the score probably could have been 5-1 if he hadn't saved
Yeah.
that 20 that Sergio Orhel won and the Kuipers won. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he certainly made a big difference, right? I mean, the Fire got 8 shots on net, which I think is what you've got to focus on. Expected goals was 2.5-ish. So, expecting all of those to go in, I think, was unlikely.
Sure.
But the win was certainly there for the taking. And I think that more than just that, it just didn't really feel like Atlanta were ever in it. And I think that that's the caveat with a little bit of this is, on one hand, sure, it's great that they didn't feel like they had anything in it. On the other, it's like that's what they've been all year.
Yeah,
Alan?
that's low key what I was gonna say as well. There was very little times where I felt threatened by Atlanta. I think maybe in the beginning of the second half they were sort of playing their style as opposed to the Fire controlling. But for the most part, it felt like it was the Fire's game from beginning to the end. Of course, there was the one little oopsie doopsie in the 80th minute from 80th something minute from Sam Rogers. But again, we pulled it back, and I definitely should have been more than just 2-1. It could have definitely been 3, even 4-1, if it weren't for the like you mentioned, the saves from Brad Guzan, as well as I feel like some just missed opportunities, either just shots that just went right into the north or the south stand, or that were just wide, or were just very light taps into the hands or the chest of Braguzan. So it's
18 shots on target,
finishing.
right?
Yeah,
and I think that's what you want to focus on. Now, some of those shots, I think, which we'll talk about in a second, we talk about people's performances, but some of those shots, I think, did not have a very high chance of going in just based on where and how they were taken. But certainly there were good looks on goal. And the Fire missed a couple big chances, which means they were getting big chances. And I think that Atlanta had no real chances other than a couple nervy moments. You know, around that 80th minute, I think is especially when it looked dangerous. Emmanuel Latte-Loth looked like he was on a mission to get a goal, and he's a guy with the talent to do it. But, you know, it hasn't been clicking for Atlanta, and it didn't click.
Nope.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It didn't click for Atlanta. I was, as I do after wins, I like to peruse these opponents' social media just to see what their fans say about the performance, because that's interesting feedback to have. And they were very upset once again with the key players to their team. You know, Miranchuk, their Ukrainian guy in the midfield, and Outlied
Russian, just FYI.
Russian, excuse me. Not, I don't know why I assumed he was Ukrainian. Had
Miranchuk, the Chuk sound is normally ethnically Ukrainian. So you're not wrong.
Yeah, I am.
But,
I am Ukrainian, so I guess I made a poor assumption. But had a really poor performance. Miguel Almirion, obviously a guy who got them an MLS Cup back in the day before he went to Newcastle, played poorly. And Emmanuel Latte-Loth, outside of that 80th minute-ish opportunity, was largely locked up in part due to, in my opinion, a good performance by Jack Elliott. But it felt like they were shooting their foot. And this is an Atlanta team that, because we didn't talk about it in the preview, on paper, they're pretty talented. So the fact that they haven't clicked yet is very surprising. But that showed specifically in this game. And I know Tim mentioned like talking about player performances. So I'm just curious to hear this group's opinion. Who was your MVP on a day where pretty much nobody played poorly? I'd say it was a very, very sound group effort from everyone. But I'm curious, is there someone who stuck out in your brain as the MVP of the match? Greg Berhalter gave the game ball to Hugo Kuipers for a well-rounded performance, of course, scoring and just running around doing what Kuipers does. Do you agree with that? Is there someone else that's sticking out, Tim?
I think that he's got to be up there. I mean, if we're grading on a curve, right, I think Jeff Gall has to get it because he did have to look sharp at a couple points, and he never looked nervy at any point in the 90 minutes. And I think that says something because it's his, you know, he's worked hard for this. It's, you know, Goodman caught himself being like, you know, you've seen his performance level up, and he's like, well, I guess he's like 32, but he still has improved, I think, in his time that he's been in Chicago, even if he hasn't been getting first team games. But Hugo was the reason the Fire, I think, had the win, and he looked sharp. Like he looked like a guy that could have had another goal or two.
Alan, over to you. Player of the match, guy that impressed you out on the pitch.
Well, I mean, of course, Hugo not only continued to show that he's not only a threat in front of goal, but he helps build up those moments leading to shots on target or those dangerous attacks. So, I mean, again, I'm just going to continue praising that front line of Hugo Kuipers, Zinkernago, Bamba. The midfield also of Orel, Pineda, Gutierrez was looking pretty solid. And honestly, I feel like this might be a little bit of cheating, but Greg Berhalter and the substitutions he made in the 31st minute with Glasgow, Haile Selassie, and Kwame coming out, I mean, all of those players had a part leading to that second goal. So I feel like he just made the perfect substitutions to respond to going down, essentially.
And I think if you could give the man of the match to the bench, like the three subs that came on that 81st minute, that's who would get it, right?
Yeah. That's sort of what I was alluding to.
I also feel like adding on to what Ellen said, I'm going to hop on my bandwagon again and say this was a great game from Pineda. Like, he genuinely had a very good game today or yesterday, but still. But him on Horrell did well. Kwame did well. It was this is one of those games where nobody had a bad game. Everybody had anywhere between meh. I'd say Rogers had a meh game. I feel like Bamba kind of had a meh game to pretty well. Like,
and I think that's Yeah, and if we want to talk about Bamba for a second, because I think that that's kind of become a story. I think that he was put out against Detroit to try to get his confidence back, and he had a couple of moments, like he, was able to dribble to himself over, I think, the head of at least one Detroit City defender right outside their box in the Detroit game, but like he didn't score a goal, and he didn't look like he was anything close to the most dangerous guy on the pitch. And he looked fairly anonymous out there. And like Rodgers was not expected to be a high level starter in this league when he was brought in. Jonathan Bamba was, and he was fairly anonymous. And so if we're grading on that curve, then I think that it's kind of disappointing. And it's kind of been a theme where like he's been like the slowly vanishing designated player.
There were more than a few times yesterday where Bamba made a pass that just was to nobody. He literally, I think he was trying to pass to Guti, and at one point he literally passed it directly to an Atlanta player that was like 5 feet away from him. And I feel like part of that is adjusting to the league. I feel like part of that is he's just not as, like, he has those moments where he shows the speed, but he's also not going to be your big assist guy. He's not going to be your big goal guy. Obviously, he's not David Accam. He's more like what we expected Zinkernagel, honestly, to be.
And that's the thing, everyone was talking about, will Zinkernagel be the starter on this team? And I'm sure we'll talk about him in a minute because I got a lot to say. But now I'm thinking to myself, where does Jonathan Bamba get that bench, so to speak? I'm looking at his numbers right here because we mentioned that he was kind of obsolete, and the numbers back that up. 2 for 5 on successful dribbles, 0 for 3 on crosses, 0 for 2 on long balls, really not contributing to anything. We know he's got that speed. We've seen it. And I know John mentioned this. I don't remember if this was on Hot Takes or the Bonfire a while ago, but his one-on-one take-ons are under 50%. What exactly is he contributing? Yes, he has, 5 assists on the season? And I'm not sure how much he's getting paid. I'm sure Tim might know that off the top of your head. Do you?
Not off the top of my head. No, I haven't dug into the salary numbers yet.
But a lot of money.
I believe it would be probably around 5. I believe I heard
5, but yeah, that is a lot to put up, to be a very average winger, I guess is the point. And then you look on the flip side, Philip Zinkernagel, who in my opinion, over the last 2 games has quite possibly been our best player. He's looked very comfortable on the ball. He looked very comfortable in the box. He's dribbling past anyone he wants to. This is a guy who, in my opinion, has done, like you mentioned, DJ, what Bamba could be doing on a consistent basis. And although his numbers, goals and assists, is not where Bamba is yet, although he's not far behind, he's really, really impressed me. And he continued to impress me in this Atlanta match.
And against Orlando, I said one of my 5 things that I published, I called him the hardest working Fire player. And like, I don't think that there's really a debate about that from that match. And I think we saw a lot of that again. I mean, like, the dude is the guy that sits down, like lies down on the wall defensively. And then he gets up the field and he controls possession and he creates space for others. And he does it in a way that's really, fairly selfless, right? Like he does have some good looks on net from time to time, but he's largely creating for others and not being selfish. And it's really refreshing to see.
One thing I will say also in Bamba's defense is Bamba has had the joy of Gutman behind him. And because Gutman's been genuinely pretty good this year, Gutman's been the guy that's been delivering the crosses. He's been taking the shots, such as yesterday where he decided to take a shot from outside the 18 that went over. Gutman apparently forgot that he cannot take a shot unless it's a volley. Whereas Zinkernagel has been forced to be the guy on the right because you've already had 3 different guys starting on the right, including a guy in his first real professional season at this level, a guy that was only in USL, 3 years ago, and a guy that's at a U22 level. And Zinkernagel's been forced to be like, okay, I got to work with these guys. Here you go. I'm going to help you. Bamba and Gutman combined really well, but Gutman's the one taking the crosses. He's the one doing all of that, which isn't a bad thing so long as Gutman's actually helping, which he is.
And I think that's the other side of it too, is that that also means that when you're looking at the Fire's lineup that you're going to be defending against some skilled players on the left. So, you're right. And that's where you're planning on the attacks coming from. And so that makes it a little bit more predictable. I think that once Leonardo Barroso gets healthy again, and we have that kind of like more strength coming up the right side of the pitch, and it can become, if never 50-50, at least there's a lot more things to think about coming up that right side for the Fire. I think that will then give Bamba some additional time and space to create his own chances and finish chances that are given to him. But having said that, the guy has been getting looks on goal, and he hasn't really, I think, done enough with them cumulatively without saying that any individual one of those is really the problem.
We spent a little time talking about the attack, Bamba, Zinkernagel, and of course, 8 goals on the season, Hugo Kuipers. I want to spend a few minutes to talk about the back line. And although they didn't get the clean sheet for the reason that we all know and we'll eventually talk about, I'd say the performance overall was really, really nice. All the way from Dean to Gutman, the back line was really good. And they managed to subdue an attack that, like I mentioned earlier, on paper is really, really good, including Latte Lath, who is the highest incoming transfer fee in MLS history, correct?
Correct.
Which is
over $20 million. So he's a very expensive guy coming into this league.
Yeah, and Jack Elliott and Sam Rogers. Obviously, Sam Rogers had the own goal in the 80th minute. Had a better performance than he's had in the past few games, own goal aside. Do we think Sam Rogers is starting to solidify his spot into the starting 11 until Carlos Turan returns in the nowhere near future? Or do we think that Greg Berhalter is still going to spend some time playing around with Omar Gonzalez and Christopher Cupps in that back line too?
I think right now it's Rogers to lose. The big thing too with Rogers is he's also the only one that really you're expecting to start. Full honesty, I don't think any of us are expecting Gonzalez to start any games this season unless absolutely needed. We definitely were expecting Cupps to start any games unless absolutely needed. So as long as Rogers is healthy, as long as he's not getting in his own head and having those mental lapses, Rogers is a starter until Tron returns, in which case then you have a discussion, but that discussion will be put on hold the second Tron goes down with an injury again.
Honestly, I think that we're probably seeing the opposite here. I mean, so after the game, we asked Berhalter about Sam Rogers, and he said that, here's a quote, I think he's trying, and to me, it's just continuing to work on the training field, searching for that consistency, sticking to the principles of how we play. And it wasn't easy in the case of making an own goal and some other plays, but give Sam a lot of credit because he's played a lot of minutes this year and he's hanging in there. So when your coach says you're hanging in there, it's not exactly a ringing endorsement. And there were other points in the game where it felt like he was struggling a little bit with the pace of things going forward. And I think that we've seen that when Rogers is on the pitch, Elliott tends to perform worse. And I think that it's because Elliott has more to think about, more on his plate, and he doesn't feel that Rogers is going to take care of business in the areas that he's supposed to be doing that quite to the right degree. That's a theory. I haven't talked to anybody about it. Neither, Elliott nor anyone else. He wouldn't tell me anyways because he's a team player. I think that Cupps looked pretty good, and I think that Cupps is on an upward trajectory here. It would not at all surprise me if we saw more minutes from Cupps, maybe in starting minutes, maybe as a planned substitution in games. I think they're going to be ginger with it, but I think that where things are probably headed is in maybe 2 months or so when Carlos Duran is healthy. I think that Berhalter's plan is going to be to make sure that there's some strong competition at that spot between the two of them. And if Rogers can push into that conversation, all the better.
Healthy competition, no matter if you are a quote unquote guaranteed starter, even if you are 16 years old or if you're over 30, it's always good to have that healthy competition. Basically, it doesn't matter what age you are, it doesn't matter what your quote unquote label is while you were brought into this team. It's that healthy competition that we're always looking for in the squad in this league, honestly.
I think it says a lot too. The only person we didn't really mention as like the one in competition is Omar Gonzalez, which is good.
Yeah, well, Omar Gonzalez knows his role, and I think anyone in the city of Chicago who's paying attention to MLS knows what Omar Gonzalez is able to provide at the ripe age of 38, although that's not old yet. Yeah, so we know Sam Rogers is a Berhalter guy. He was brought in. He made his U.S. men's national team debut under Greg. I'm not lying when I say that. I believe it's a
Yep.
guy that is clearly here to play the system. And Greg Ball hasn't connected with. I want to spend 1 minute talking about the own goal, and I'm just curious. There's going to be a lot of flack, a lot of criticism against Rogers for obviously putting it in at a really untimely minute. For those of you who didn't see it, basically a ball deflected off Jack Elliott. And Sam Rogers nicely put a header in the back of his own net. How much blame are we actually putting on Sam for the own goal, or was it simply a freak accident in line with Chicago Fire culture?
Freak accident. I think he gets some blame because he didn't get the ball right as he wanted it. You could tell what he was trying to do was just head it out for a corner, but yeah, it was just a freak accident. I would not say it's too dissimilar from the Wondolowski miss in the World Cup where he needed to get it perfectly, and he did not get that perfectly at all.
Yeah, I agree. It was, he tried to head it out, but he had another player right next to it. He had an Atlanta player right next to him, and I think he just choked, essentially.
It was Emmanuel Latte-Loth, right? And I think that's worth saying is that he's the guy that was bearing down, and he is a dangerous player, and it looked like he was hunting some.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you look at it, it's not that the ball deflected off of Elliott. There's a cross in from, I want to say it's Moranchuk.
Yes.
I may be wrong about that. It's kind of like a looping cross in. So it's high in the air. Elliott heads it, but he doesn't head it out of danger. It stays up in the air. And now if Rogers hadn't done anything, it would have gotten to a safe area, and there was not really anyone bearing down on it from Atlanta. So I think that's where you put it on Rogers, is you say, if he had been heads up enough to realize that doing nothing would have been the safest option, that own goal doesn't happen. At the same time, I don't think that Elliott really connected with the cross, what became a header for him, anything close to the way that he wanted to. And I don't think that he necessarily had to play it there, because I think that Rogers had it covered. And if Rogers had been the guy defending it, now Latte-Loth was bearing down on him. And I don't think that he was fully aware that Latte-Loth was bearing down on him. So maybe that was in Elliott's decision. Maybe that was the thought process. But I think that leaving it or doing a better job controlling it from Elliott probably also means that it doesn't happen. Having said that, though, like I said, if the fact that Rogers could have done nothing and it would have been okay, but instead decides to intentionally head it in what would have been a very good looking, like a Benteke quality header if it had been at the other end of the pitch, I think is not a great look for him.
No, obviously not ideal. It was at that point where the groans came out and everyone's like, oh,
Yeah.
Here we go again. And then, of course, Greg Berhalter brings on the reinforcements. 81st minute. I didn't actually get a chance to see this. Were the Amari and Kwame substitutions already warmed up, ready to go on, or were they a direct result of the goal being conceded?
Yeah, they had been planned. They were warmed up.
Yeah.
They were about to come on. I think that we actually were told who was coming on and who was coming off a little bit before the own goal happened.
If I remember correctly, I also said somewhere that Marin was the last second addition, just because they were like, oh, great, we need a striker now. We need an extra help up top.
I believe that may be the case. I think maybe one of the other subs wasn't planned. But having said that, Marin made the best use of the minutes that he was given here, right? And like we saw that after, I think, a really, really strong performance on Wednesday from him. He's certainly making a case for more minutes. Now, the problem is, it's like, do you want to take minutes away from Zinkernagel? Because we just talked about him. So, that's a pleasant problem to have on the whole, right? But, Zinkernagel did play, half a season in Europe before starting preseason with the Fire a little bit later. And we've seen guys like that run out of steam, coming up not that far from now in the MLS season. So, Zinkernagel being a planned substitution off and then having Marin coming on and taking up more of those minutes off the bench, I think is a winning situation for Zinkernagel's play as well as it is for the team and Marin. But man, just the 1-2-3 combo from those three subs to to get a goal like 5 minutes after coming on is amazing to see.
I'm going to say this, my hot take for the episode. Marin right now, the way Marin's playing as a bench player is exactly how Fabian Herbers should have been playing for the last 5 years.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's something that that our own Jiggly Carollo said repeatedly, is that like the Fire have plenty of good bench players. The problem is that they're called starters. And I think that we're seeing that now. Now, I think that Marin does have starting quality in this league. I don't think I'd put him ahead of Zinkernagel. And they also have very different profiles, right? And I think that we've seen Brian Gutierrez, who didn't have, as far as I know, any part of his defensive game whatsoever before this season, start to show more defensive prowess. And we didn't see a lot of defense from Marin. If we can start seeing more of that, I think that may, be one of those things that would help equalize and make the case for, I can eat up minutes that you want to get to Zinkernagel and I'm playing well enough where I've earned it. And at the same time, like Omari Glasgow, right? Like, how is he going to get minutes as a right winger with the way that this team is built, right? Because like you'd probably put him behind Marin no matter what, and you'd put him behind Zinkernagel the way that like they've been playing. And he found minutes in a different spot, right? He found minutes in a wingback role, and he's looked really increasingly good in it minute after minute.
The other option too is to have a Marin fighting Bomba for that spot, but regardless, this is a very good situation to have, considering last time this was a Fire's problem was 2017 with Alvarez and Solignac.
I was going to say
the Fire have been. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I completely agree with DJ. It feels very refreshing to actually spend a lot of time talking about position battles. I'm just looking at the bench. Obviously we had Kwame, Marin Haile Selassie, and Amari Kaman, and still guys like Kellen Acosta, a guy we signed to be a sure-footed starter a year ago, still on the bench. It's a really fun problem to have. I don't know if Marin has any left-wing experience. I imagine it's not incredible.
He's played there, yeah.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to see, because I don't think you could take Zinkernagel out in any capacity. I'd argue he's our second best player on the pitch right now. But that Bomba Marin thing is something that's going to stick in my head for upcoming weeks, because it does not get any easier.
We haven't talked enough about the guy that actually scored the goal, right? Romingé Kwame, who came out and, he's still, I think, adapting to this league. He talked about having, health issues that he had to battle through to get match fit on the way in from the time that he arrived. And, again, it's like he's played well. Like, I think that in the next game against Charlotte, I would like to see him for more than 10 minutes. But then it's like, who do you really take out? Right? Like, I mean, I think the midfield trio played well all match. Sergio Argel went out first. I think part of that is frankly just, I'm not sure that he's 90 minutes match fit multiple weeks in a row at this point. Pineda has done a lot of good things. He got a yellow in this one. Maybe you give him some fewer minutes, but it's every one of those spots in the midfield. I think there's someone that wants those minutes from you and is making a good case for them, which is, again, like great position to be in versus where this team has been.
So there's a lot that right now the weakest position in terms of depth is 100% striker. And
or left back. I mean, if we're being
or center back.
Yeah.
Well, no, because center back, at least you have Cups, Rogers, you have Gonzalez, you have Tehran when he returns. Left back, you at least have Dean and Reynolds, which is an argument for when Barroso returns. But striker, you have Barlow and just Barlow. And then there's going to be Borso and Bolts, but they're not going to be playing much, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a roster build issue, right? But I think that it's worth. But yeah, like every place where there's a couple of guys that can come in, we're seeing a good case for minutes. I thought Dean had a fine game. Like, I don't want to overhype him with, what happened. This maybe wasn't the game that showed his strengths the best, because Atlanta's attack just, it looked like a pickup team at certain points with just the amount of coordination and strategy that we saw from them. So that, I think, is the part of the position that Dean is stronger at than, say, like an Omari at the moment. And it wasn't a match where Dean got a chance to really get anything highlight reel worthy, just because Atlanta wasn't providing that opportunity to him.
Are we going to see a Wilfred Zaha, Jonathan Dean matchup on Saturday? Is Zaha a left winger? Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know, but it's something I'm thinking about. And to Tim's earlier point about Kouame, I feel like he's earned the opportunity to get a start. And I would say the natural organic fit is against Pineda. Pineda's played a lot of minutes early on in the season, and I'd like to see what Kouame can do with 90 minutes. And it looks like, yes, Zaha is primarily a left winger.
Left winger. They can, in MLS, right? Like they could throw him in
wherever. Yeah.
I think a number of positions, right? Like he can play well enough to be a 10, but he was brought in to be a left winger. And that I think that they've been playing Leo Abada on the right.
Yes.
I forgot about Leo Abada. What a guy.
Abada and Bronico in the center, and that's the one that matters.
Yeah, and I know I brought up the Charlotte talk, but obviously we'll save the majority of the Charlotte conversation for our preview later in the week, which we promise 100% will be filmed and recorded. But this feels like it will happen. This feels like a pretty organic place to call it right there, gentlemen. Fantastic performance, fantastic 3 points. The Fire have now gotten results 3 games in a row, which is on the uptick. And as the weather gets warmer in Chicago and around the country, hopefully our spirits and our vibes too. As always, thank you so much for listening to our show. We appreciate you. If you like what you're hearing, feel free to shoot us a like. Feel free to comment, whether you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or our YouTube channel. We're grateful for anything. We are looking forward to the 5-day road trip. We'll have a lot of content coming out. Keep an eye on our website, meninred97.com. Alex, Tim, Max doing fantastic God's work over there. We're very grateful for all the time and effort they put into there. And of course, a special thank you to Austin Meyer, our executive producer, who takes so much time out of his days to edit these podcasts and make sure they are coherent for all of our wonderful viewers. That's all we got today. Thank you again for listening. And as always, come on, you men in red. We'll see you later this week on the Bonfire.